Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Rogue Monkey podcast. My name is Kevin and I host a show that delves into people's journeys, explores their experiences and shares inspiring stories from the moments and life events that have brought them to where they are. In this episode we are joined by the wonderful Rebecca Brennan, speaker, coach, runner, business strategist and so much more. Rebecca shares with us her multifaceted journey, discussing her work in digital product development, her passion for coaching, and her pursuit of a master's degree in psychology. She also reflects on the challenges of balancing multiple responsibilities, the lessons learned from running and sport, and the importance of dreaming big whilst taking actionable steps towards goals. Rebecca also shares her transformative experiences at the Do Lectures, the significance of running in her life, and how she navigated both grief and personal growth along the way. This conversation truly emphasises the value of being present, finding balance, and pursuing what absolutely matters to you in your life. You can find out more about Rebecca's journey, hear her incredible Do Lecture talk, and connect with her via the links in the show notes. But we're going to get straight into it and our latest episode of the Rogue Monkey podcast as we speak to Rebecca Brennan. Hello, Rebecca, and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's ironic that I guess the underlying thread of today is going to be how to get stuff done, and yet it's probably taken us a few months to pull this together because of diaries and all different plates that we spin. So would you like to give our listeners and viewers just a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, a little bit about what you do, and perhaps a headline overview of your journey?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, you're right. It's been a while, maybe because I do a lot of stuff. And in terms of kind of work, I work for a digital product agency based in Guildford. So we build apps, some interesting apps actually, apps, websites and platforms for people like Premier League, ITV, and Unum, to mention a few. Outside of my day job, I'm passionate about coaching. That's team coaching, individual coaching in a business setting. And I'm currently studying for a master's in psychology because I am really interested in human beings and their potential. So I was always into psychology. It was a bit of a hobby. And then I just decided to do it a bit more kind of with some discipline and structure. So last year, I went back to university, which has been an interesting experience.
Okay, before we get into one of the other threads I want to talk about, I just want to touch upon that experience because went back and started my master's when I was, I think, mid-30s. And I look back and I'm like, I don't remember going, oh, I'm consciously going to take a 10-year gap between doing my first qualification and my second one. But actually, when I look back, there was certainly I was much more focused on what I wanted to do when I chose to do it, and also the research aspect of it was much more focused because I knew what I wanted to do. It wasn't just pick a project because you've got to pick a project. Actually, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do, and I need the topic. So how have you found going back to studying, I guess, a bit further down the working journey, just because you've got that experience?
I last went to university 10 years ago. I seem to do this big educational thing every 10 years. Last time I was at university, I was at Reading University and I studied a master's in coaching and behaviour change. This time, I'm going back to do psychology because I want to understand more kind of the science of why people do what they do. And in that 10-year gap, I guess learning has massively changed. And it's weird, but I've learned about learning in an AI kind of in a AI kind of world. How we now learn is quite different. So all my lectures are online, they're sent to me. We have tutorials on Teams, and obviously everything's at our fingertips in terms of information. So actually learning is about how you put these things together, not just the acquisition of knowledge. So I've learned a lot about learning, which has been great.
So, I mean, there's so many different, I guess, aspects and strands to your journey that I want to touch upon, but just talk to me a little bit about the spinning too many plates. And I say that because knowing some of the other things I want to touch upon in terms of research, work, hobbies, sporting activities, books, and all these other things, like how, how have you navigated that journey of I want to do 1,001 things, but I have time to do five, but I'm still going to do lots anyway. How do I actually navigate that? And what are there any? Because that seems to be a trap so many people fall into. And we're talking about a mutual friend before we started recording, and every conversation I have with him, that it starts off, I'm doing too much, trying to spin too many plates, and yet I'm still ploughing on, none the wiser. So, how have you found that experience, and perhaps some wisdom for people out there who seem to be doing exactly the same?
Yeah. I think the first thing is I think I like doing a lot. So I feel when I am busy and I have a lot of different things that I might be balancing, I feel quite alive in that. So I think my preference is to have a life with lots of things to do and lots of hobbies. I feel at my best in that kind of state. Sometimes you can feel at a tipping point of getting a little bit overwhelmed. So I think what I have done is I have a few kind of ways of thinking and doing things. But I tend to, although I might have a lot of things I'm interested in, I tend to have a few things that I'm focusing on at that time. So I might have ideas that I might write down and say, at some point I want to pursue this, but the timing isn't right. But it's not, I'm not going to do it. It's just, I'm not going to do it now. So just thinking about the psychology degree, I think I wrote down 5 years ago, I want to do a psychology degree, but I put no pressure on myself that I was going to do it at a certain point. I didn't have that ticking clock, got to do it now. So I think I have a lot of ideas. I then kind of have a way of just going, okay, what am I really going to focus on? And then I think because I am busy and I have got a lot, I've learned ways of working smartly, even down to managing my day. I'll tend to wake up in the morning and think for 15 minutes, I probably just think, okay, what's today about? What are the three things I'm going to focus on today that's going to move the dial? But I don't think about the overarching goal. I might just think, what are the actions today? And so my things to do list will have three things on it. And then tomorrow it'll have another three things on it. So I guess I've got this internal way of working where I've got the big kind of focus areas and then I've got the smaller steps, and I consciously will think about that first thing in the morning. So I don't rush to my email or check my phone. I do that as a habit. So I've kind of learnt through my own experience these different techniques, I guess, that work for me. So I don't know. I've just learned how to manage a lot, I guess.
I'm curious as to how that some of those lessons, I guess, have come from the world of sport, because sport often people talk about big goals and big ambitions and these sorts of things, but the hardest part is taking the first step right, and actually those steps cumulatively lead you to whatever that goal might be. So, I know we'll touch on some of the sports stuff in a bit, but in terms of like your early years, were there things you took from any experience in sport or other activities that kind of laid that framework down?
I think I started running in the year 2000. So I've been running, and I say running, long distances, short distances. I've been doing some form of running since the year 2000. And touch wood, I've never had any significant injury, so I've been able to keep going with running. Um, and I think running helped me think about the process of how you get something done. I was always very good at coming up with the idea, like the dreamer. I could come up with, I want to run a marathon. I want to run the New York Marathon. So I've never been short of the big idea. But then if you've got a big idea, I guess the thing that's always kind of not frustrated me or kind of got to me is like, talk's cheap, and you can have loads of great ideas, but it's how you actually do them that's important. And I think particularly through running, I learned how to break a big goal down and have a structure of how you're going to get there. I mean, you don't wake up and go, I'm going to run a marathon and run a marathon. You have to go, I'm going to run the marathon. That's the vision. Okay, how am I going to get there? You know, you start with the small steps. I was never a runner before the year 2000. I came second to last in my first ever 10K. So I didn't have natural ability as a runner. Yet I said out loud about a day after coming second to last that I was going to do the New York Marathon. Once I said it, I then had to do it. And then I had to figure it out how to do it. And I think I've always, my big goal always has gone ahead of actually having the plan. So I've said, I'm going to do that. And then I go, okay, right, how am I going to do that? So, and I think those learnings from running or sport has just helped me kind of with other goals, such as kind of work or studying. How do you break it down and take the small step, not just the big step?
I'm curious as to where that's come from in terms of the I'm going to do stuff because you tend to have, without being too generalized here, you tend to have people fall into one of two camps. A lot of people talk a lot and there's very little action and very little outcome. And some people say stuff and then they just figure out a way to make it happen. Even if they come second to last in a 10K or whatever it is, they're like, I am going to make this work. And it might take 5 years, 10 years. And like you said, not having necessarily that pressure put on yourself of going, I want to do that. It doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow, but
Yeah.
actually, can you take steps towards it? So you just reflecting back, I guess, on those formative years, your early years of education, family life, sport, whatever it was that made up those first 10 to 20 years for you, were there people or things that started to lay down that ability to dream, but actually then to go get it?
Um, I think you're right. I think these things happen in kind of very early childhood. And I look back and I definitely have always been a bit of a dreamer about goals. I can remember when I was a kid, I used to have an atlas. I was probably about 5, and I used to close my eyes, open a page in the atlas, and point with my finger and then open it and go, "Oh, I'm going to visit that country." So I was always into thinking what's possible and where am I going to go, and I always had that kind of spirit. And I think I don't know, maybe this is my way kind of remembering the past, I don't know, but I always felt like when people said you can't do something or, that's just a dream, I always felt a real level of frustration when somebody said something wasn't possible. I can remember feeling that spurred me on to go, well, it is possible. So I always had that kind of feeling, well, you know, I'm going to try and make it possible. I wasn't satisfied with you can't do that or that's not possible. And I think what then happened is once you prove to yourself that something is possible, it gives you confidence to do something else that you think is not possible. And then you do something else. So let me put it into the example of running. And this is just an easy example, but I didn't think that I could run a 10K. And okay, the first time I did it wasn't very good and I was frustrated. So I'm going to try again. I didn't want to give up. So I tried again. I did the New York Marathon in 2001 and I was only going to do it once. I just wanted to tick it off. It was just the goal. I was going to do a marathon and then that's it. Running, don't need to do it anymore. Ticked off the New York Marathon. But once I finished the New York Marathon, I thought, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? And before you know it, if you're open to ideas or you have dreams, and then you've got this proof that you've overcome things previously, then you get more confident at having a go. And like quite a few runners, you go from a 10K to a half marathon to a marathon. And then before you know it, you're doing ultras. And you're suddenly going, well, if that's possible, what else is possible? So it's that kind of frustration around kind of maybe myself thinking it's not possible or somebody telling me something's not possible. I think it's the confidence of repetition proving that you can. And I think it's having a bit of structure and process around making what seems impossible possible. Um, so I think kind of that's my way of decoding it. But to go back to your kind of original question, I think as a child, that sense of frustration around being told something wasn't doable um, was there at a very early age.
I think it's fascinating, and I'm guessing with your psychology hat on, there's probably lots of research in this space. But I think going back to those early years, and I guess you don't appreciate it when you're a child, but I certainly look at now people who commentate on those sorts of things and talk about the fact that people project their either failure, lack of drive, or lack of ambition onto you. So instead of saying, I can't do that, therefore I don't believe you will do that, they say,
Yeah.
that's not possible, or you can't do that. And I was trying to remember where I'd seen it, and I think it's the Thomas Edison quote. And I'm going to get the number wrong because there's 1,000 versions of it, but I think it's something along the lines of I didn't fail 700 times. I found 700 ways that didn't work. And once I've eliminated all of them, I will find the way that will work. And it's that attitude, honestly, like for a lot of people, I think they become the barrier that stops them taking that first step. And
Yeah.
I know obviously we connected through the kind of Do family, but it turns out we've got quite a few connections from different spaces. But that Do lectures experience, you're quite literally putting yourself in a field with a huge amount of people who are all like, yeah, let's go. You can literally do it. Obviously for you, that was that was a decade ago now, or just shy of a decade ago. Firstly, how did you hear about that space in the first place? And reflecting back on that, how much of the people you met and the conversations you had and all of that impacted on what came next in your journey?
It, is this specifically talking about the Do lectures then?
Yeah, but when you went as an attendee, because I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
I know you wouldn't believe like where that ended up, but if we go back to where that first part of it started for you.
Interestingly, I first heard of the Do lectures through a friend of mine who I was studying coaching and behavior change with. And in typical kind of me fashion, somebody said, "This is interesting. This is an event in Wales. It's called the Do lectures. Do you fancy it?" And I went, yes, not knowing what it was. My friend had previously been, so she told me a little bit about it. She was like, you won't, it's not like a normal event. It's not like a conference. There's going to be some speakers, but trust me, you're going to love it. So I did. I applied, and you have to apply, and you've been, so you know the application process. I think the question, you have to draw a picture of yourself, and I think the other question is, if you were recommending a book, which book would it be? These kind of interesting, thought-provoking questions. So I think they curate the attendees that you got a group of interesting people, and I think they cap it at 100. So I went, yeah, as you say, a decade ago in a field with 100 other people, and had a great time. Saw all the speakers and met lots of people, and I think, and everyone talks about the magic of the Do lectures, and the magic is that the speakers are great and inspiring and thought-provoking, but it's the conversations that happen in between, around the fire, in the gin den, and like-minded, interesting people doing interesting things. And yeah, I've made some great connections. I ended up doing some other things with different people. I went to an event called Web Summit in Lisbon with a lady I met at the Do lectures. I ended up working with one of the people I'd met at the Do lectures. So it sparked some friendships, it sparked some business things, and I then went back last year as a speaker, which was very nerve-wracking.
Well, obviously your topic when you delivered your talk pulled, I guess, a number of threads and aspects to your life kind of together. But I want to go, I guess, back a little bit. I know you've already touched about the fact that that snowball effect of a 5K becomes a 10K, and before you know it, you're running ultras. But just take us through that kind of journey from, you said there, did my first 10K, came second to last, set my heart on doing New York, did it. And that was obviously a long time ago, and it's snowballed from there. So do you just want to take us through a little bit of that running journey, if you like? And I guess some of the things that we can talk about the specifics in terms of, yes, you did that event, that time, or that distance, or whatever it was, but running means a lot more to you than that in terms of, I guess, who you are as a person. So can you just talk to us of how that's evolved over the last kind of 20 to 25 years?
I think running for me, although there's been goals and challenges, it's never been about the goal. It's always been about the journey, and it's always been about kind of the people, which sounds kind of odd because running on the surface is not a team sport. But if I go right back to my first marathon, I mean, I ran it with my dad in 2001. So it wasn't about running the marathon and getting the medal. It was the fact, I had the shared experience of running through the streets of New York with my dad. And we still talk about it now. It's shared. It's something that we did. We remember the moment on the bridge. We remember getting into Central Park, the look of, we're going to do this, and we crossed the line together. And that's the bit that's important to me. It wasn't crossing the line. It was crossing the line with my dad. What a great experience. I think I always enjoyed the way that running made me feel and still do. And I think for me, running gives me two things. It gives me time to think and time not to think. And I think both of those are kind of great states because, people talk about mindfulness, and I sometimes use running as my moving mindfulness. I go out by myself and I actively decide I'm going to think about nothing. And it's really nice, especially if it's a scenic run and it's in the mountains and you don't have your phone, you just have some water, you're just on your own, and that sense of freedom in the environment, but also freedom in your mind. It's very cleansing of your brain, I think. And when you're busy and you've got a lot on, it's really nice to be able to think of nothing. So I think for me, running's about not thinking. Equally, I think running is a great way of solving problems or doing some really intense thinking. So sometimes if I've got something on my mind and I'm really struggling with it, and you're sitting maybe looking at your computer and it's not coming to you, I will actively go for a run thinking, okay, I'm going to think about that. So it gives me mindful time and it gives me really quality thinking time. So I think running has been about connections with people, and it's also been about that thinking or not thinking. And I think over time, running's just become part of my life. I can't imagine not doing it. It's taken me to some amazing places. I've made a lot of friends. I've done some great challenges, but it's not about the challenges. They've been there. It's been nice to achieve them, but it's been about the lifestyle that it's provided me. So my big obsession is to make sure I'm running for as long as possible, which means having to change the way I train. As you get older, as you've been doing this a long time, how do you maintain yourself so you can keep doing it?
Okay. So when you say running for a long time, I'm guessing multiple days falls into that category. And it's certainly something that a lot of people struggle. And, we've had quite a few ultra endurance athletes, not just runners, but people who have cycled for days or run for days or swum, obscene amounts. And it's really interesting that everyone has their own personal relationship with it. So you might have two people who have run exactly the same event, but actually what they take from it personally is so very different. And I think often it's, without sounding too corny, but I'm thinking back to one of my episodes, maybe 50 shows or so ago, and we had the former head of the SAS's mountain division was on here, and he was talking about climbing Everest, and of Nepalese origin, said looking down the camera, it wasn't about climbing to the top. It was the journey to get there and the experiences and the lessons along the way and all those sorts of things. But it's true. And I think people will often talk about the fact that in elite sport, one of the hollowest things you'll get is the medal. It's that, that's something, yep, there it is. And then it goes, on a shelf in a box, whatever it is. But for you personally, you've obviously, like you say, been to some amazing places and done some things. So maybe just touch upon a couple of the adventures, if you like, that you've had through running, whether it's formal or informal events, but just places that you look back that are like we all used to print off photos and get them through in the post. What are those photographic memories for you that you're like, wow, that was such an incredible visual experience?
Yeah. I'm going to pick, I talked about this in my do lecture, but for me, there's probably two running experiences that I'll talk about. I ran in 2022. I ran the Cape Wrath Trail, which is from Fort William in Scotland to the end of Scotland, at a point that's called Cape Wrath. It's kind of the furthest, most westerly point. So if you think John O'Groats is on the easterly point, it's on the other side. And that was about, I say about because it's not a designated path and there's different variations. It was about 270 miles, I think, in the end. And I did that over 5 days. I think it was 5 days and 5 hours and 29 minutes, something like that. And I did it with not very much sleep. And when you talk about experiences, that was probably a I'm gonna say life-changing. I don't mean in the grand kind of life-changing experience. It made me kind of think differently about things. My mum the year before had passed away after having breast cancer. And I was due to run the Cape Wrath Trail. They do a race, a staged race, where they don't go over like 8 days and it's all kind of flagged and you have camps that you stop at. And unfortunately I couldn't do the race the year I was due to do it because my mum was in hospital. So after a year, kind of after my mum passed away, I decided, well, I'm gonna go and do it, and I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna run to the lighthouse at Cape Wrath. And I kind of designed how I was going to do it, and rather I didn't want this solo experience of doing something hard and suffering. I actually wanted to do something hard and not suffer, which sounds a bit weird. So I decided, well, how am I going to do this the way I want to do it? And I decided that I would try and encourage a few friends to come with me as my support crew. So I kind of formulated a plan. I said, right, goal, I'm gonna run to the lighthouse. And then as you do, as I explained, I then went, okay, how am I gonna do this? Better figure out the plan. So I studied the route. I got the book. There's a guidebook, one of those Cicerone guidebooks. I got the book. I spoke to the author. I figured all the logistics out. And I got three guys to come with me and help on sections of the route. It 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 had been such a sunny week the week before. Now the west coast of Scotland, notorious rain, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be sunny, it's going to be beautiful. And the day I started, it was not beautiful, and it rained. And when I say rain, it was like constant rain. But in that rain, the scenery was amazing. There was amazing waterfalls. We were running through mountain valleys, and it was hard, but it was probably the best experience I've ever had. You know, a team of people running for 5 days through this remote, epic landscape. You can't really replicate it. I can't go, I'm going to go and do it again. It was just that in that moment with those people, and the scenery was fantastic.
So your partners in crime, Dan, Ash, and Roger, they
Yeah.
they very interesting. Like you talked about the reason you chose them in terms of you knew they would contribute to the experience of it, and without putting down their running experiences, you didn't pick them for that. And that's a really important thing. Like, there's whether it's kind of that fable of, you've got a dinner party with 5 seats, who are you going to have around the table? You're going to pick people that may not be culinary geniuses, but actually they're going to be amazing company on that evening. And I think for this journey here, obviously meant so much to you because of that personal experience over the year before. And one of the things that they talk about when you lose someone is this grief journey and the experience that you go on in different stages. And I think one of the hardest parts, and I can only speak from my own experience here of grief, is that when you have those not necessarily life changing, but life affirming moments, feel like I've done this, I've been there, I've experienced this. Yes, you can capture the videos and the photos and all those sorts of things, but it's how do you capture the emotional bit? Is you can't bottle that bit up and go, oh, I can immediately take myself back to what that felt like because it's so special. And that then becomes the slippery slope of, right, well, I'm going to do more things that give me that kind of feeling, right? So how have you navigated what's come next? Because obviously, that's 4 years ago now, and
Yeah.
so much has happened since in terms of all these other plates, like we talked about, that you're spinning. So, how has that shaped what you did next?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember the journey back. So if we were in the lighthouse, the west coast, and then we have to get all the way back to Guildford, which is probably like a 12-hour journey. I think I was asleep for most of it. But we were in a bubble for 5 days and we were really bonded. We'd been on this epic journey through the wilderness and all these crazy things had happened, this extreme weather. We kind of we bumped into a rescue team because there was a missing man. We saw a pony trekking the Cape Wrath Trail. There was all these different little kind of moments that we all shared together, and we had been in this bubble. And I don't know how people go into space or go to the poles and kind of come back from these things, because we were away for 5 days and we felt it. We were like, we don't want to go back to normality. We've got to go back to jobs and commute to London and talk to people. And we've just had this epic, intense experience. And I think the natural thing that you want to do is replicate it, do something again. So you can't, you kind of find yourself going, yeah, what happens? Maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. And I did have those feelings, and I think there's a term for it. I don't know if it's like a bounce back expedition or something. People, this is a thing that happens to people. They do something epic, they have a hard time, but this life affirming time, and they want to go and replicate it. And I think I noticed that I was possibly kind of thinking like that. And I can remember going, I'm never going to replicate that. So I'm just going to sit with it, reflect on it, and be comfortable with it. And not, I had to really stop myself from trying to want to do something else. And I can remember having a conversation because everyone says, what are you going to do next? And I was like, I felt under pressure, I had to say something. And then I said, I don't know, but I will do something. And when I do something, I'll know what it is. And so I didn't do anything really. I carried on running, I carried on enjoying it. I can remember I took the guys out for a meal about 6 weeks after we completed it, and we had a great evening out to kind of mark the end of the expedition. And it wasn't until I think it was 2024, I decided to have a go at something called the Bob Graham Round, which is for people into fell running, they'll know what that is, but it's a self-organising event. It's 42 peaks in the Lake District, and the plan is to do it in under 24 hours. So I had a go at that.
The thing is that it is seeking something that is a moment in time, and unless you have a time machine, I think it's fascinating that you can articulate the fact that actually I've just had to make peace with that, because I think there's a lot of people who chase that again and again and again is endless. It's something that's never it's never enough because it is an incomparable experience. A moment in time is exactly that. And I think back to the satisfaction of crossing the line in the Brighton Marathon, like the first time I ever did a marathon and I crossed the line, I was like, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the most satisfying thing I've ever done. And that was that. And when I got fish and chips and sat on the seafront. And I think it's getting to that point in your life, is it? And having that perspective, it then allows you to enjoy moments for exactly what they are. And I don't know if that's a modern day technology thing where it feels like we all have to constantly be chasing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, whereas actually being able to go, no, that was a thing I wanted to do and a process I wanted to go through. I've done it, and that's it. That's okay. Metaphorically, it's now on my bookshelf, and I can go back and revisit the memories of it and
Yeah.
reread it and rewatch it. But actually, I don't have to write the same book again. Um, so how have you found then? I guess obviously we're talking specifically about running here, but obviously you've got this in lots of different angles with your work and your studies and all those sorts of things. So how have you, how today do you sit in that kind of present space with whatever it is you're doing instead of, right, we're going to achieve this and we've got to jump onto the next thing? How have you found that and what does that look like for you day to day?
I guess it's I think if you're going to do anything big, you've got to really want to do it. And I think it's being, and big might be committing to writing a book. It might be going back to university. It might be running something really tough. If you're going to do something big, I think you've really, really got to want to do it. And it's very easy to write a list of things that I'd like to do. But it's I think the discipline is to go, what do I really want to do? And I think that's a bit of an art and a science. I think intuitively for me, if it's something I really want to do, I feel it. I can feel the energy when I talk about it. I can feel my mood change. So there's a sensing of, do I really want to do this, or am I just thinking it's a good idea? So, and I think it's having that patience. It's like I say with the kind of psychology degree, I've wanted to do it for a long time, but I was patient enough to go, do you know, it doesn't feel right to do it now. So I'm all right with going, I'll know when it's the right time. So I think it's about going, there's things I'd like to do, but what do I really want to do? How am I going to spend my time? And there's only so much time, and you don't want to fill it with loads of stuff because you miss the experience if you're running from one thing to the next. If you're chasing the next goal to the next goal, you're so obsessed with the next goal, you don't have time to reflect on what's happened or what did you learn. So I think there's an element of thinking there's these things, but this is what I really want to do, and having the patience and realizing that that's okay. There's no pressure. Where's the pressure coming from? Yourself. No one's, apart from people going, what are you going to do next? Which is a little bit of pressure. I'm actually not going to do that much next. I'll know. I'll do something at some point. So I think it's like taking that pressure off yourself and just feeling what you really want versus what you'd like.
Okay. So the this nature around focusing on the experience and being present and actually not always the next big goal and the next big challenge and what do I want to do. One word that stuck out there was patience. And I think that's something that it almost runs in complete opposition to the way the world's going at the moment. Everything's needs to be done tomorrow. So having that internal ability to hover your foot over the foot brake and say, we don't need to get there at 500 miles an hour. What are some of the experiences that maybe over the coming, let's say through 26, obviously you've got the the degree going on, and you've got these other things spinning away. But what are the maybe two or three things that you're really immersing yourself in that you're really enjoying, or that are in planning at the moment that you're really enjoying that process of going through?
I'm really well. I've got one last module to do in my degree, social psychology. I've got a module. Then after that, I've got to do a project. And that's quite a big commitment because it's like, what are you going to specifically study and then write up about? So kind of that's very front of mind because there is a deadline which I haven't imposed, which the university imposes. So, and the deadline's August the 31st. So I'm in the process of figuring out specifically what am I going to put my time and effort into around this project. And I've got two thoughts actually. Maybe you can help me with this. But I'm going to be studying cognitive psychology, which is the internal kind of way our minds work. And I'm either going to do cognitive psychology and endurance, which, there has been some research about it, so it's not new. Or I'm going to be looking at cognitive psychology and AI. So I've got these two territories. And I'm being a bit patient because I've got two territories. I don't have the specific question. The question will appear. So that's what I'm focused on. I'm also focused from a running point of view. I am heading to, I think you're doing the Brighton. Did you say, no, you're doing London Marathon this year. I think I'm doing Boston Marathon, which is around the same time. So we've got about 10 weeks. So I'm heading out to Boston in April, and I'm kind of enjoying doing some road running. It's quite nice. You don't get as dirty, you don't get as lost. And the long runs, they're long, but they're not as long as running in the mountains for days. So I'm quite enjoying getting on the roads, especially in the weather that is very rainy at the moment. So I'm enjoying that.
My brain's immediately wanting to link you up with Mike Stocks, who was one of our former guests, who had at the time the Vets record for the most distance run in 24 hours. But he's part of a network that do a lot of research and feedback into the academic community on endurance sports. So there's a there is a follow-up action for me. I guess just to wrap us up, obviously you've still got so many more journeys and experience coming up, and I talked about putting metaphorical books on the bookshelf already. I can see behind you, you have an extensive book collection. So can you recommend either a book, a resource, might be a podcast, like anything that you've come across that you're like, that's really helped shape my thinking to get me to where I am today?
You've also got a good selection of books I've noticed over there. I'm seeing one that says surfing. A book I would recommend, or a podcast. I read a lot of books. I tend to read a lot of psychology books. I would say a great one, a classic one, if people haven't read it, is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. Fantastic book, short book, split into two sections. His story of being in a concentration camp and surviving, and the second part is about his what he calls it logotherapy, which is all about kind of meaning. And I think for me, that book is about, you can take everything away from somebody, but you can't take away how somebody thinks and what they have in their head. So that's a fantastic book for people who haven't read it. And controversially, podcast wise, I'm really enjoying a guy called Andy Kirkpatrick, who's a climber. He also did a Do lecture a long time ago, but he talks a lot about climbing and his various different journeys he's been on. But I really like his style, his irreverent style, and the fact that he makes things just very funny, interesting, and he's just a bit different to kind of lots of other podcasts you hear. So if you haven't heard Andy Kirkpatrick talk, check him out.
Podcast is called Psycho Vertical, and we will make sure that we link directly to that in the notes below. But look, Rebecca, the nice thing is I feel like, and we talked about this kind of network of where it always goes apart and comes back together, and you can never map it out. But I do feel like at some point we're going to have to revisit this once you're ticking off another master's or something further down the line, because you'll have another itch to scratch. But it's been absolutely wonderful. I've really enjoyed sharing your story, and we'll make sure we link both your Do Talk and the resources we mentioned today in the notes below. But a huge thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thanks, Kevin.
A huge thank you for joining us today for our latest podcast. You can connect with Rebecca on socials and hear her amazing Do Lectures talk via the links in the notes below this episode. A quick request to my wonderful podcast community that if you are able to sponsor me raising charity funds by taking on the London Marathon in April, you can find my fundraising page in the show notes. As always, please be sure to hit subscribe however you're joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again very soon for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.